entrepreneurs. I'm excited to bring to you today Jeff Rendell, who has been a friend and colleague and mentor of mine for many years. We break down with Jeff some of what he does for his morning routine on how he gets set up for success every day. He's currently a vice president at Cultivate Advisors, and they have been on the Inc. 5000 list for the last 3 years running. You're going to hear about how Jeff has personally overcome adversity and how that impacts his business approach, his approach to vision planning, leading through influence, and much more. You're going to enjoy this from Jeff Rendell. Hey Jeff, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast. For those that may not know, Jeff and I worked together for a period of, what was it, Jeff? Was it about 9 years? And I worked as Jeff's direct report for 7 of those. And I would consider Jeff to be both a friend and a mentor of mine. So really happy to have Jeff on and pick his brain for John's and my benefit today, as well as the listeners we have.
I appreciate it. It's, I've listened to a bunch of work that you guys have done. And to be honest, I was nervous to come on with some of the people that you've had on before going, well, I haven't written a book. What am I going to talk about? So, but I got faith and belief that, there's someone listening that will take something away from our conversation today that'll make an impact in their world. And that's why I was willing to say, sure, I'll do it and put my faith that we'll have some good discussion.
Jeff, I also think it's because we believe there's a book in you somewhere. We just got to get it out.
That's funny. I've been told that a couple of times, and maybe like a ghostwriter to help me or something like that. But man, that's a daunting process.
Well, we had a former podcast guest who we may be able to hook you up with, who may be able to do some ghostwriting for you.
I was going to ask John, because I think I remember listening to that one, and John, you were saying that may be a path that you would look at. So, have you taken that forward at all?
Not officially, but I certainly, part of one of the learnings we had in these podcasts way early on was the writing every day and taking 20 minutes, blank sheet of paper, and just write every day. And I've been doing that fairly religiously now for a year and a half, almost 2 years. And there's a lot there, just like we talked about, just a lot of learnings. And even through these podcasts, Rich and I talk about it a lot. Through these conversations in our subconscious, it just brings back a whole bunch of other things we remember that we learned, but we kind of forgot about, and refreshes the memory. So it's been great.
Well, I'll tell you that it forced me in this process over the last couple of days, because I couldn't get on here and just kind of wing things. Like, that's just not the way I wouldn't have slept for the last week if that was the case. So literally, I had to go and put together notes of okay, what would I want to share? What are some experiences? What are some stories? Because they're all there, but unless I kind of take the time to write them down and stuff like that, then I won't remember. So
well, I got to say, there's an example of a lesson that I have learned from you is every time you have an opportunity to work with and speak to others, whether it be small group on a podcast, a group of 1,000 on a stage, you are one of the best prepared people. And you prepare like heck in the beginning, and then you're just really present when the event actually goes on. So that's one of the notes that I've taken from you in our time together. So with that, why don't can we have you introduce yourself to some of the listeners who may not know you, and just a little bit about your story and where you are today and how you found yourself there?
Sure. So I guess, I've been on this entrepreneurial journey or leading and supporting entrepreneurs for probably almost 30 years now. And it started back in when I was 18 years old, freshman at the University of Waterloo. We can all share this common piece of that, that college pro beginning. I was in the co-op program. So I was looking to make money while I was going to college to be able to pay for it. And so I'm in the co-op program. And every day you would have to go during this certain season, and you'd read a list of 30 or 40 job opportunities, and you'd slide your resumes in these envelope or these slots, and you'd apply for these jobs. And I, leading up to, I was like, man, how am I going to differentiate myself? It's just, it was a big school of computer programming and engineering. And I'm like, I don't have any of that. So what I did was I actually put my picture on the top corner of my resume to try and stand out. And so I would go and I applied to all these jobs. It happened for about a week. And then you start to get callbacks. I only got 2 callbacks, College Pro Painters and Action Window Cleaning. And those were the only two that must have looked at this guy and said, okay, well, we got to at least talk to this guy. Like, he's bold, he's either full of beans or maybe he's got some confidence. But so I started, that was my first summer with College Pro. I spent, 3 years as a franchisee full time. After that, I moved to the US. College Pro moved me to the US. I branched out and worked with CertaPro for 10 years, was a partner there as well. And then about 3.5 years ago, I made the move to Cultivate to be able to just continue this passion of helping young entrepreneurs, whether they're early in their stage or whether they're trying to exit the business.
Well, that brings up a whole nother topic that we won't jump into necessarily, but you and John have that in common, coming from Canada and then coming over to the US.
Yeah,
I was connected with me for the first time.
And John and I were franchisees at the exact same time, but we didn't meet until 2018, like literally 20 years after we were franchisees.
Yep.
So it's crazy.
Well, yeah, because I was a franchisee in the US system. You were a franchisee in the Canadian system.
Right.
And then, things kind of came back full circle in the US. But
yeah.
And here we all are.
Exactly.
Talk to us, Jeff, about some of the things that really light your fire and you're really passionate about maybe these days.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that is most important to me, if you say, hey, Jeff, what's your why? It's about helping people live their greatest life, both personally and professionally, right? And I know that we'll get into kind of the professional stuff and the transitions that I've had over time, but I really do believe, and all the entrepreneurs I work with, like, it starts with yourself and being healthy yourself and having that strong, those routines, strong faith, balance. Everyone goes through a ton of adversity. And I would say I've probably gone through more adversity personally than I have professionally. But I think it's this balance, and I've learned through tragedy personally on how to then deal in the business world. Right. So for, Rich, we know each other well. Like, my mother was killed in a car accident when I was 5 years old. My dad took his own life a month before my 17th birthday. Those things really do shape you, right, for the rest of your life. If I didn't have healthy practices personally in place, then I'd be a wreck. Like, I really would. I can remember elementary school. I had dyslexia. I was going to speech therapy as an elementary kid, and then lo and behold, I'm doing public speaking and touring the city, with doing public speaking, winning for the school and moving on. And I'm 16 years old, and I'm doing my eulogy for my father in front of a packed church. It's just, everything happens for a reason. And I think having those strong foundations on your day-to-day routine can get you through so much.
I'm curious. I think I was there the first time you shared that about your parents, and it was at a skill development summit. Mm-hmm. And I remember you showed news article and that type of thing. I'm curious about that journey for you, because that wasn't something that you talked about a lot or you shared openly, and here you are on the podcast in the first 10 minutes, and that's something that's part of your story that you've become comfortable sharing. What has that journey been for you of being comfortable with that and reckoning with that? And what has that meant to your professional life, that you had said some of the challenges you've had personally, you've been able to translate over into professional benefit?
Yes. Well, it has taken a long time, right, to be able to be comfortable to kind of share. But I think, this leaders need to not have this facade, right, and that everything is okay and everything's been perfect. I'm not a big Instagram guy or Facebook or anything like that, because that's not the real individual that you're seeing on there a lot of the time, right? So I think it's important for us more to share who we truly are, and that everyone has been punched in the face and kicked in the gut and had challenges, and these are my challenges, and they're no harder or easier than anyone else. So I just like to be able to kind of have that perspective. And when I see someone and they're having a really tough day, or they lash out at me or something, I just go, there's something else going on there. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to give them the grace because, right, like we're all just trying to live and do our best.
Well, and I know you've had some of a journey of faith yourself, and it's since you've had some of that journey that some of this reconciling and feeling kind of more comfortable with your own history has come about. What's the role that faith has played in that for you?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. It's one of the things I go back to. I think of college. So I was playing college football. I was in my second year. Go out to practice, and one of my own teammates breaks my scapula in practice. So I'm in my second year. I break my scapula like 3 games into the season. I'm distraught. Like there's nothing worse that could have happened to me in that moment. Lo and behold, what I'm going to therapy, trying to get better. We've got a game coming up, like it's like 4 weeks later against our rivals, the city that I left to go play at a different school. And the coach, I go in after Friday practice. I've been kind of playing and trying to get through, and my jersey's not hanging up in my locker. And that means I'm not dressing the next day. And I was putting all my effort, everything to be able to play that game, going back to my hometown to play. I was distraught. Marched into my coach's office. I'm crying. I'm like, how can you, like, I was distraught, right? It's like at that age, I didn't know the emotion and everything. Lo and behold, what happened to me over that 5-week period when I was going through therapy, my soon to be wife was in the therapy clinic. She was a kinesiology student and she was partnered with the football team. And I built a relationship with her over that time period. And here we are, been married for over 20 years, have 3 wonderful children. And it's like, if that didn't happen, maybe the rest of my life doesn't happen the way it is. Right. So like, there's so many of those things that have happened to me over the years of like when I moved to Michigan, issues with my daughter's health, and we were just at the right hospital, like miles away from where we needed to be, and moving to Michigan to Arizona to land a great church, and like it's just everything I do believe happens for a reason. We just don't know at the time, and we got to be patient and kind of sit in some pain sometimes.
Jeff, love to bring this, what you talk about in this adversity. And you mentioned earlier something along the lines of like the adversity I've faced personally, is much bigger than what I faced professionally. And now as you work with entrepreneurs and you hear about some of their labor pains, right? Yeah. Oh, this happened and that happened. I'm assuming that you can provide them a really good, fresh dose of perspective. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you work with a lot of entrepreneurs? Because I'm sure that from a business side, not too much probably rattles you because you can look at perspective in life and go, look, things happen for a reason here. You think your problem's bad. Yeah. Let's put these into perspective.
Yeah. And I would say, John, that the thing that I try and work with, whether it's someone that, I'm supporting, as a client, or whether it's someone on our internal team, is not to go, hey, woe is me. And it could be a lot worse, but it's like, okay, do you have a healthy setup outside of business? So personally, so like, what does balance look like for you? What does your daily routine look like? What does your faith look like? One of the things that I have done probably over the last almost a year now is I've blocked Wednesdays off, where I don't schedule meetings on Wednesdays. So I'll do some project stuff. I'll work in, maybe a little catch up, but I'll also get a longer run in or a longer activity, or I'll meet up with a friend for lunch or something like that to give me that break throughout the week. And I've got a client that has actually adopted that now. Like we've talked about it and he's adopted that. And he's a guy that I love to go for runs with. So at any point I can be like, hey, you want to go for a run on a Wednesday? I know he's available. Right. So I think that is something, having boundaries and having your calendar set up. I've got a great morning routine. I wouldn't say I got a great evening routine. I'm still kind of trying to work on that, but my morning routine, and I'll share that openly with individuals to be like, hey, what's that look like for you, and how can we help? Because I think just having that right mind space, you can't give what you don't have. So if someone doesn't have a clear mind and a healthy kind of start to their day, it's hard to go and help people throughout the day.
I think that's a great place to dig in. What's your morning routine?
So morning routine, first thing, I'm usually up around 6:30. First thing is my Bible app. So I'll pull that out. The quote of the verse of the day. There's a quick little video with it. There's a little devotional. So that's 15 minutes max. All right. And then I will go and do some journaling. John, you mentioned that earlier, right? Like journaling or reading. So I've always got kind of two books on the go, a faith-based book and a business book. And I'll just rotate. Like I won't read both books every day, but there's one of those three that I pick up, and it's just kind of where my mindset at, what I feel I need that day. I always have a pen in my paper. When I'm reading, I'm always making notes. Again, I don't have a great memory, so I need to write stuff down for it to resonate. So I'm always reading. Then I'll sit down and I do about 15, 20 minutes of email. So while I'm having my pre-workout drink or my coffee, I'll go through and just clear the email so that that's good to go. And then I'll go get my exercise in. So I schedule 90 minutes a day to go get my exercise in. So whether that's running, biking, going to the gym, whatever it may be that day. And then I got my green smoothie when I get back, and then I jump into my calls. So that's my tight, like that. I do that 95% of my days. And as I said, I still got to work on my morning or my evening routine, because that's watching the news with a glass of wine. And I know I could do better than that.
Love it. And so, Jeff, there's a few big takeaways right off the bat. And by the way, if anybody wants to take no meeting Thursdays, I'm available for golf this spring and summer. So let me know. But, strong foundation is resonating, right? You need to have strong balance, routines, faith, and all that kind of stuff. But you need to have a strong foundation. Another component is, look, we're all going to face adversity, and really, if you don't have that strong foundation, it may make that part a little more difficult to process and to go through. And I think the last piece, not the last piece, but another key point I got here is vulnerability. Just, we got to be more vulnerable. We get, stop putting a face on or a facade. Like you are who you are, and realize that sometimes people are going through things and have to overcome them. And maybe you're there to help them and lead them in certain ways through that path. Right.
Yeah.
So some of the key points that I've gotten so far, bring me back to Cultivate Advisors now. So, where is Cultivate Advisors going? I know you guys have been growing pretty fast. I know, I think I saw Inc. 5000 in terms of fast growing companies list. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that business does exactly, how you're working with entrepreneurs today, and what you're trying to do with that business more specifically?
Yeah, great. I appreciate you asking. Yeah, we've been Inc. 5000 the last 3 years in a row now. So when I joined, I think we were at 15, 16 advisors. As of today, we're at 55. Right. We've got about 465 active clients right now that we're working with, and we're partnered with each and every month. So we made our first acquisition last fall, which was really exciting. At the heart of what we do with business owners, we always start at financials. So in our advising methodology, we always start with financials at the heart. So lo and behold, our first acquisition was going out and acquiring a bookkeeping company. So Breakwater Accounting. So they are now in the fold with us. So we really go out and help business owners propel their business beyond expectations. Now, we only work with business owners that want to grow and want to move their business forward. Because why the heck would you pay and spend the time with an advisor if you don't want to take your business to a different spot? So we get business owners that want to move their business but are challenged in some way. And our methodology, as I said, really starts around financials. But then for all entrepreneurs, regardless what industry you're in, there's always this back and forth of like, are you in growth mode, or are you like trying to figure out capacity? And if we've got a business owner that's in growth mode, we're going to focus on sales and marketing. If they've got that figured out, it's like, oh my goodness, we've got all this work coming in. We can't handle it all. Then we flip over to the other propellers, which is recruiting and leadership. And that helps fill the capacity, right? Now, running through all of that is productivity. So those are the 6 areas, or we call them our propellers, that we focus with business owners on. We look at financials first at the heart of the matter, and then you got the growth side, sales and marketing, you've got the capacity side, recruiting and leadership, and through that all, you've got productivity.
Love it.
That's how we work and advise businesses each and every day.
Okay. I want to dive, if I can, just a little bit deeper through that. I certainly get, the major theme, and I'm assuming entrepreneurs that are listening to this podcast fit in that category. If you're not trying to grow your business or get somewhere with your business, then why are you listening? Or why are you hiring Cultivated Advisors, right? We're assuming that you are in that bucket. But let's start first with financials. Why exactly do you start there?
Yes.
versus starting on whether they have a growth or capacity issue or starting somewhere else? Why do you start there?
Yeah, for the health of the business, like we could go look at the stats. And again, I said my memory's not great, but like it's astounding how many businesses go out of business in the first 3 to 5 years,
Hmm.
right? And how many businesses actually make it to the 10-year mark. And at the end of the day, if you don't have a financial model that works, like whatever your widget is, if you've got a financial model and you're not making enough on your widget to cover your overhead, right, you're gonna go out of business, right? If you're not looking at your financials and making decisions based on financials. So as an advisor, how could I ever come in and give a business owner advice without looking at their P&L, without knowing their balance sheet, without seeing their cash flow? So any of the listeners that are out there as a business owner, if you're not deep in your financials, right, you need to be. And if that's not your forte and you just go, I'm just not a financial person. It's like I live by how much is in my bank account. Go find someone that can bring and put a spotlight on your financials and can help you, because that'll make everything.
Yeah, no doubt. I share that thought as well. I mean, it's hard to, if your passion is to propel your business beyond their expectations, but you have no idea what's going on the financial side of
Yeah.
it, you have a really hard time executing that. So I get it. On the second and third one, are you in growth mode? Or are you in capacity mode? If you're listening to this, how do you know? How do you know if you're on growth or capacity? What are some indicators you have as an advisor to be like, okay, you're over here versus over here?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we're going to look at first systems in place, right? Like, do you have solid foundation of your systems on sales and marketing? All right, because the other thing that we look at, and every business owner has an entrepreneurial journey, right? And we've coined them, and of what we kind of feel this journey is, right? And someone will move from being a hustler, right, just being all by themselves, to then they're becoming an experimenter where maybe they're starting to bring on their first or second or employee. And then they become more that visionary. And now they're actually getting some systems in place. And then, they're starting to really go and after acquisition of talent and recruiting. And then they become a systemizer where they're actually putting things in place and they're starting to get a leadership team. And then eventually they become this influencer. Right. And now they're like, okay, well, how am I protecting this business? What am I doing to create other good outside of the business? I got I'm out of the day to day fully. So I think that plays into, John, when you ask the question of how do I know where I'm at? Am I trying to go after, growth or capacity? It's kind of like, where are you in your journey plays a role into it. And then what are your goals and what are your financial goals? So if your financial goals are to make 250,000 and have a $1.4 million business, and you're doing 250 grand right now, well, heck, it's all about sales and marketing, right? It's all about sales and marketing. If you're at your threshold of that 1.3 million, but you're pulling your hair out because you're working 85 hours a week and you got a ton of turnover, well, geez, yeah, you got to work on recruiting and leadership. So it
Got
really
it.
ties into your journey, ties into your goals, where you're at. Those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about when I'm connecting with a new business owner.
Jeff, what I love about what Cultivate Advisors is doing is, there's certainly a lot of really strong entrepreneurial / executive coaches that we've met with and continue to meet with and do phenomenal work. Heavily focused on, that individual, their leadership skills, maybe even some of the things we talked about before in terms of their foundation, but they're focused on the individual. What I love about what you are doing from an advisory perspective is you're really jumping in as an entrepreneurial coach for that entrepreneur on some of the business fundamentals, I guess, the financials, the sales and marketing, the recruiting, what systems do you have? It's a different type of coaching. It's coaching more for the business than for the individual, which I really, really love. And if you talk about this entrepreneurial journey for a second, hustler, experimenter, visionary, systemizer, influencer, those 5 different phases, where are most of your customers? What zone are they in?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we definitely have clients that are in all of them, but I would say that experimenter and visionary, that early stage is where we have a lot of our clients are in that stage, and they're trying to get to that next level. They're like, hey, help me, right? Help me get to where I am an influencer and I have a leadership team and I'm out of the day to day, right? Like that's their aspiration, that's their vision, right? Because that kind of fits what we work with clients is trying to move to that stage. So I would say that's, but I mean, I've got clients that literally I've been working with since day one when I joined Cultivate. Within my first month, they became clients, and they're still with me almost 4 years later. And we're still on that journey together. And, they're still fighting capacity and growth year after year, depending on, how the year is. And all business owners, I've yet to meet anyone, and I'm not perfect myself either, that has a handle on all 6 of those areas, all those propellers. And like, everyone needs a little touch up, right? A little lift up. Outside perspective is also, because you can be so honed in and feel like you're a 10 out of 10 on marketing, but get some outside perspective and you'll realize, oh, I do have some opportunity. There are some opportunities where I could, kind of tweak my marketing. And that's the big thing that we do, is we provide entrepreneurs outside perspective, which is a big challenge that a lot of business owners don't go and do. They don't get that outside perspective. And it doesn't have to be an advisor. There's lots of ways that you can get outside perspective. But I think as a business owner, that is so critical.
You had talked about some of your clients you've retained since day one. And I know on the other side of that coin, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with who are the clients they don't want to take. So I'm curious, have you ever fired a client? And if you have, without exposing who that is, why did you fire the client? And what are your criteria to identify somebody who isn't good to work with for you?
Yes. So I would say there's 2 that come to mind, and absolutely won't share names or anything like that. But at the end of the day, they're not fun to work with, right? Like, we get some of these entrepreneurs, or we all know people that are these naysayers, or like, you give them advice, you give them perspective, and they're just not open to it, right? And they may say they're open to it, but at the end of the day, they're not going to take action. So if I'm going to sit across and have, my 2 meetings a month and go deep with this business owner and invest my time and my energy and my passion, my heart, and they're not going to take action on it, then it's like, what are we doing here, right? Like, this isn't just about a paycheck. Like, this is about really making a difference. So I would say that's number one, is if they're just not open to change, that's not going to work. And I would say that that's probably the biggest one, where I would go, you know what, like, I only have so much time. I only got so much, hours in the day, so much time on this earth. Like, I got to be working with people that I love and that I enjoy and that are sharing my same passion about moving the business forward. So I think that's when I realize, I go, this isn't working. And maybe it's a better advisor, right? So we do move clients from advisor to advisor if something's not working, because maybe it's just there's a bit of a personality piece that we need to kind of figure that out. So that happens as well.
Well, I'll ask a question that I know I'm setting you up, because it's in a sweet spot of yours after having worked together for the number of years that we did. The first thing you said was, they're just not fun to work with. And then you expanded on, they're not open to change, because, assuming change and people acting on the consulting, that's fun. But the first thing you keyed in on was, they're not fun to work with. Here's the setup question, because I know how important it is to you, but I'd love for our listeners to grab some nuggets from it on the importance of fun for you in your work. And my hope is that some of our listeners will be able to translate some of what fun means to you in your work and how you go about having fun, and that they may be able to do some of the same. I just generally think we could all use a little more fun in our lives.
Yeah. I'm always up for that, right? Absolutely, Rich. And I would say, for me, like, what's in my DNA? What am I passionate about? I love to exercise. I exercise every day, right? Like that, I don't go a day without it, whether it's hiking, biking, swimming, at the gym, playing basketball, like, it's something. So for me, what I like to do when I bring my team together is, we're going to go out and we're going to do some activity. We're going to do something physical, right? So I had our new advisors into Phoenix. This was about 6 weeks ago. And it's, for me, any meetings when we come together in person, it's 50% play and 50% work. So they came in, it was just a quick trip, but the morning we were going for a hike. So I was taking them to Wind Cave Trail, and we were going on a hike in Usery Mountain. And that's what we were doing for 3 hours for the day. in the morning, and then we come back, get cleaned up, and then the afternoon was all about work. We were doing initial calls, we were doing coaching events, we were, working on the business. Same thing. Our whole team is doing a retreat in April, so it's coming up here in 3 weeks. We're going to be going to Dillon, Colorado. One day is all meetings. The second day, some groups going skiing. I don't ski, so I'm taking a group on fat bikes. We'll ride those for 4 hours. We'll meet up for dinner. We're going to go throw axes. We stay in a house together, right? So we got this 12-bedroom house. We're getting too big, so we don't all fit there. So I got a motel with 5 rooms down the street as well, because we've kind of outgrown this cool place that we've gone to before. But it's like getting people together. We cook together. We clean together. We live together for a couple of days. And I mean, Rich, you and I have experienced that many, many times over. So, again, what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for all the listeners or all the leaders out there, but find out what works for you. Like I went on a 4-hour hike with a client 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday. I've gone mountain biking with another local client here 2 or 3 times. So it's like finding out what works for me and connect. Now I can also run a book study. We've done that before, right? Or a podcast. We'll listen to a different podcast and discuss it. So it doesn't always have to be physical, but as you know, that's definitely usually where I lean.
Well, I know you still do hiking in the Grand Canyon with current and former clients. I do have to remind you that most of the fun experiences we had when we went off site, they were a little bit more sedentary. We did zip lining together.
We did.
We did 4x4ing in the sand dunes of Utah.
Yes.
So our listeners could probably appreciate when you do those types of experiences with people who you have a professional relationship with. That's why one of the first things I said about Jeff is he is a friend of mine and a mentor of mine, and he holds both positions in my world. And it's easy to do that when fun is a value that you bring to the workplace, and it's not just something that shows up on a sign, it's something that you act on. It doesn't even, as a matter of fact, I don't think it shows up on a sign in your office or at a sign in Cultivate, right? But it's a value you operate through that you barely need to talk about because people experience it when they're in your presence.
Yes. And I think it goes a long way. It really does. These relationships, when you're cooking with someone, like we've done that, right? Like that makes a significant difference. We think of our flight group program at back in the CertaPro days, those are still strong at Certa. Like it's those relationships and those connections is what really matters.
Well, I want to come back to this fire to client piece on another part. You said somebody who's not open to change is somebody who you would fire as a client. They're not acting on the advice.
Mm-hmm.
In a place like that as a leader, because although at Cultivate, you're a hired consultant, you are still a leader. You
Correct.
are working with them and leading them and coaching them. So what is the place that influence versus power holds? And again, the context I ask this from is I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs that look at it like, hey, it's my business. I call the shots, do it because I said so. Yeah. And, it's my livelihood that's on the line. This is my 401k, my house that I put on the line. I said it has to be done this way, which is a very power-oriented way to lead. I'm assuming you don't lead that way when you have a client who's not acting,
yes,
just based on knowing you. But I'd like you to speak to that juxtaposition and maybe the importance of leading through influence.
Yeah. And I think, we can all kind of go down that spiral and come to a position of power, right? I'll use the word, I don't typically use power, authority, right? Like deal with, lead from authority versus influence. And I think we all can get the point where, man, if we're not conscious of what's going on, if we're tired, if we're not taking care of ourselves and our body, that we can snap and easily go to power, right? Or go to this leading by authority. But I'll say I try to, and we as advisors try to stay as healthy as we can and lead through influence. I think where I learned this and where my biggest challenge with this was when I went from College Pro to CertaPro. So I had spent 10 years at College Pro, 3 as a franchisee, and then 7 years kind of on the corporate side, leading students. And then to go move, and now all of a sudden I'm 32 years old and I'm leading adults on these 10-year franchise agreements. who have 20 years more experience than I do, it was like, okay, how am I going to get through that? Right. And I even I'm interviewing an advisor later today. And one of the things on his application, his concerns is I'm a young entrepreneur. How am I going to deal with business owners much older than me? Right. And it's so relevant, right? Like he's thinking that as he's coming in to the interview later today. What I would say, there's what comes to my mind is earning trust over time. And I know that we all share kind of that same language of, hey, what's trust? Character, competence, common sense of purpose. The 3 C's: character, competence, common sense of purpose. And I think that character, right? If you've got an issue with your values, you better seriously get that in check, and you better have someone that can really, hold you and help you there, because it's hard to change your value set. But I'll assume that most of our listeners and people are tuning in here have a good value set. The final one, common sense of purpose. I think that one is, you can teach that, and you can coach someone to align with who they're working with, or align with their employee, or align with their client and their customer, and have a common sense of purpose. I think competence is the hardest one, and that was where I kind of felt coming in, as this young ops guy, was this: how do I show competence? Because I really don't have it yet. So what I did, and I'll throw in a suggestion for the listeners out there, is the thing that I did is I went and visited the most successful franchisees. All right. So we're talking 15 years ago. I went and saw Dan Mahaney. I saw Jeff Brown. I saw Dave Rankin. Like, I went out and I met the top achieving franchisees. So then when I started having conversations with the other 20 franchisees that I was automatically just thrown in to start supporting, I wasn't speaking from my experience. I was like, hey, I was just out in the field with Dave. This is what Dave's doing. Hey, I saw this in Jeff's business. This is what Jeff's doing. Right. And that built some credibility. I had a client, this was a couple years back, but he was young entrepreneur starting. He was a custom pool builder, doing about 30, 40 pools a year, about $1 million. And he had big aspirations. And my advice to him was like, you need to go and study the best of the best. Like, who is your competition? Who is an amazing custom pool builder that's not within 300 miles of you? Right? Like, could you reach out to them? Could you somehow get a call with the CEO? Could you go visit that business? Again, if it's not your competitor, right? And learn about what they're doing. So I think that's a practical thing that any entrepreneur could do, is go study the best of the best in your industry and learn what they're doing. If they're not a direct competitor, go try and get a meeting with them and sit down with them, and maybe they'll give you a tour. I mean, years ago we looked at going and touring Zappos, because Zappos opens up a tour to everyone. I went to a session with the Ritz-Carlton for 2 days. It was a session on service excellence, right? Because I wanted to get better at customer service. Well, where do you go? Go to the Ritz. So I went to a 2-day session with my peer group, and we took a ton away from that. So I hope that it kind of answered your question on, I think, a trust. I think of building competence. And then the last thing, we can dig into if you want to or not, but just building relationships over time. And I think there's some things that, business owners can do, and that we've done in the past that, can help strengthen those relationships.
Yeah, that's great, Jeff. If I come back to, again, some of the key topics I keep learning is, like, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to not be on Rich's side of the ledger of customers you've fired, but been on this customer ledger where, Jeff loves working with us and we're great at what we do. If you have strong foundation in place, right? If you know your financials really well and you're locked and loaded, if you seek outside perspective, including go see the best and learn from them and see what's going on, have advisors, things like that, what would be the next big piece that you'd say? I have a strong foundation. I know my financials. I'm seeking outside perspective. What's the one other piece I need in order to be successful in what I'm doing?
As a business owner, as an entrepreneur, John? Yeah. I think, I think of the word hustle, and I think of the word rest. So, like, once you've got all this in place, you got to go and you got to work hard. You got to hustle, right? Like, you got to put in the time, but you can't burn yourself out, or you can't get off of meaning, right? You've got to also have that time to rest. So being very clear in your calendar and setting boundaries and making sure you have, like, again, I'm taking Wednesdays to be more of a strategic and not take meetings. Not saying that business owners have to do that, but hey, can you get 2 or 3 hours a week that you can block out and put your cell phone away and don't take meetings and just use that as a time to catch your breath and be a little more strategic? I think that, so that's what comes to my mind.
So when you
Also,
say that, though, you say,
rest.
take a breath and be more strategic. That's very difficult for entrepreneurs to do.
Yes.
They're running. What's the purpose of being more strategic? What should they be doing in that moment of strategy?
Well, I think they've got to get out of the weeds, right? And that's one of the great advantages of working with us is we force business owners out of the weeds for 2 2-hour sessions a month because they got to sit down with us and they're paying big bucks. So they're focused that time and energy. They're not checking their phone and doing email while they're meeting with us because they're writing a hefty check. So it's pulling yourself out of the weeds and looking and going, hey, maybe it's revisiting your vision. Maybe it's going and re-looking at your customer testimonials or your last 60 days of survey data. Maybe it's getting a survey out to your internal team of how they're feeling about the company culture. But it's slowing down and going, hey, what data am I not looking at because I'm just running so faster? How can I look a little further out because I'm really kind of stuck in what's going on today or what's going on tomorrow?
Okay, so I'm pulled out of the weeds. I have this 2-hour session, and now you're talking to me about vision. What are you talking about now? Because now I may have a mission for my company, I may have some goals, but what's the difference between that and vision?
So I think vision is a pretty big word, so it means a lot for a lot of different people. Like I have my own personal and professional vision that I've worked on, and I could pull it out here. It's an 8-page document now. I started it in 2013, and it's a living, breathing document in my life. So with a business owner, we're not going to look at their vision every 2 weeks, but hey, we're going to do a quarterly review. We're going to want to pull out your vision. I mean, you guys have had Cam Harold on here with the Vivid Vision, which was a great book. I read that. I worked with the Vivid Vision with a client. We recently had Brian Scudamore from 1-800-GOT-JUNK, 1-800-GOT-JUNK on with our Cultivate community like a week and a half ago, and he's got his painted picture, right? So it's like, hey, let's pull that back out. And again, it's not pulling it out every meeting, but it's like slowing down if you're feeling off the rails or you're feeling off meaning. Hey, let's go back to your vision and let's ground and let's make some decisions over the next quarter around moving your vision forward.
Got it. So Jeff, do you have I'd hate for you to share your whole 8-page vision, although I'm curious, but do you have a method? If I'm listening to this going, okay, I have some goals for my business. I have some goals for myself personally, but how would you suggest someone go about starting to create their 8-page vision plan for themselves personally and professionally?
Awesome. Well, it's not going to be 8 pages overnight. It's taken me 8-9 years to get it to that point. So it's probably going to start at 2 or 3 pages. I do have kind of a simple process. And if any of the listeners are out there and you want a copy of it, Jeff@cultivateadvisors.com. I'm not hard to find. Jeff, Jeff, at cultivateadvisors.com. I'll send it to you and I'll send you a worksheet. But really, it's about we've got a baseline of questions, right? And Rich, this is work that you and I did years and years ago together. Like, I got to give you kudos for getting this started at Certa. Like, I started this when I was in CertaPro because of you, right? And it's morphed and it's changed and it's evolved for me. But it's just starting with a bunch of great questions that we can serve on a silver platter to you and say, hey, go start answering these questions to really get you thinking, get you out of the weeds. And from there, so it's answer questions and then write a personal and a professional vision for yourself. And some people that I've worked with, that's 2 lines for each. Some of them, it's paragraphs. Me, it's a bunch of bullet forms on a sheet of paper of what my personal and professional vision is. The next thing is going and creating a bucket list for yourself. And this was one thing, again, I kudos back to my CertaPro days. When Mike Stone came in to be the new president, he sat down with all 54 employees and said, hey, I want to go through your bucket list with you. And I was like, I don't have a bucket list. Well, I guess I better write one to get ready for my call with Mike. So I wrote a bucket list. And it's amazing to go back and look at that bucket list that was in 2015 that I first created that. And to go, what kind of things personally and professionally on that bucket list have happened. All right. And then, kind of the final piece is you've got to put time in your calendar to review it every year. So we could go in my calendar and look, and it's at some point in July. I do it kind of mid-year. I'll go and do a review of my vision. I'll look back at it. So it's a 2-3 hour chunk in my calendar, and then I'll pull it out again when I'm doing my annual planning. So I look at my vision, twice a year. I do pull it up when I'm sharing with clients or giving them examples or whatnot, because I'm open to share it with clients and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I go, thanks to Rich for bringing this to CertaPro that got me on the path, because for me, it's been a game changer, and I've been able to take it and help so many other business owners and people that I work with over the years.
Thanks for that. And I want to get some tangible, listeners could do something next with maybe each of the propellers, if you wouldn't mind. And it doesn't need to be an 8-piece list, but if there was one thing, and I'll kind of guide you through each of the propellers if you don't mind, if there was one thing in each one that you go, every entrepreneur should do this in financials, what's the one thing when they hit the stop button on this podcast they should go do?
Okay, I'm going to cheat here, Rich, because as we know, I like to be prepared. And when I get a question that I'm not prepared, all right, I tend to get a little flustered. So I just opened up our website, right? Perfect. That you asked that, and we've got the 6 propellers, and there's literally one thing under each of them. Okay?
Amazing.
So go look at the website, cultivateadvisors.com. But I know you didn't know that by asking that question, but literally, so if you look at financials, that's the start of it. It says increase profits, right? And there's a little blurb on what you can do, like how can you increase profits, whether it's looking at your cost per, your contribution margin, whether it's looking at your overhead, but that's usually where you're going to go first is what am I making per widget and what's my overhead, right? So go look at that. The sales is build a sales team. So like if you're going to take your business to the next level, you've got to put salespeople in place. So again, whether that's depending on where you are in your entrepreneur journey, you may already have 14 salespeople. It's like, okay, how can you take your sales team to the next level? Like focus on your sales team. If you're a solo entrepreneur right now, go start putting in the work to bring on that first salesperson. Marketing is building a lead engine, right? So what systems you need to set in place so you're going to get enough leads each and every month. Recruiting is around, recruiting talent. So going, okay, what is the next person I need to bring on my team to grow? Do I have a job description? Do I have a training plan to be able to bring that next person on? Because I see business owners all the time go out and start recruiting for a position and they don't even have a training plan put together, right? They don't even have, any sort of reward plan or anything. It's like, no, I'm going to go find this person. Well, how are you going to even interview them if you don't have all that laid out? No talent person's going to come to you and go, hey, so what's training look like? And you'd be like, well, we'll figure it out once I bring the person on, right? Like that doesn't work. So that's recruitment. Leadership is really thinking about, I think, first yourself. Like maybe you need to get a 360 on yourself, all right, on just where's your leadership at. If you've done that recently, then I would say like, hey, how can you go and take the next step with developing your own leaders? You guys had a great guest on a couple of weeks ago, Jump Coach. I listened to that. I went to his website, like his 4 goals and 9 jobs. And I sent that to some clients and I sent that to our leader team. And I'm like, hey, just listen to this. It's good food for thought, right? So it's like, that was a way that I was trying to help kind of develop leaders. And then just productivity is the last one. Just what's one step that you could use to be more productive tomorrow? Whether that's using your calendar, whether that's a to-do list, whether that's delegating something that you don't really need to do. But just be more productive, make more out of your tomorrow.
Jeff, unfortunately, you can't be so prepared for a podcast. So I am going to ask you 5 quick questions to end this podcast that you cannot be prepared for.
This makes me really, really uncomfortable.
You ready? First thing that comes to mind. I'll start easy on you. Easy. Who is your biggest influence or biggest influencer?
I would go back to my coaching days and I would say Tim Clark.
And Tim Clark was who to you specifically?
So he was who helped me become an examiner within First Service and gave me my strong foundation of coaching and supporting people and genuinely doing whatever you need to do to help them be successful.
Awesome. The best book you've read that you think every entrepreneur needs to read?
I'm reading it right now, Compound Effect, Darren Hardy, and I've started to listen to Darren Hardy dailies, which have been pretty cool. So that's a new one, but I'm into that one right now. The other one that I love to recommend, Essentialism by McCowan, is another great book if you're like just on, am I focused on the right thing? Eat That Frog if you struggle with productivity, and the six high performance habits by Brendan Bouchard is another one I've read in a few years, but it's a keeper.
Wow, awesome. Okay, that's fantastic. Compound Effect. That's a new one I'd not heard of before. I'll go look that up. The most important thing of all the things we've talked about, if an entrepreneur needs to do one thing to be successful, what's that one thing out of all the things we've talked about?
Community. I think like you need outside perspective. I think like when I go bike with a couple of people, like I always bike faster when I'm in community with people, right? They help hold you accountable. So I think you need outside perspective and you need community. Don't do it alone. That's the biggest mistake that a business owner is trying to figure it all out on their own. You don't need to do that. And ask for help. Like people actually like to help. Like people enjoy, you give joy to people by asking them for help because they feel meaning. They feel like they're making a difference. So go ask someone for help.
Awesome. You guys talked a little bit about 50% play, 50% work when you guys go do some experiences. And I was sitting here listening to you guys talk about your experiences, getting all jealous. You're doing a retreat with your team. What's the best destination and experience you ever had with your team?
Best destination and experience. Wow.
Not the people you were with, but the destination and the experience.
Yeah. I mean, the mountains in Colorado are amazing. The Grand Canyon is one of my favorite places on earth. I've done a couple meetings with my team in Hawaii. You can never go wrong there. So Utah is also a phenomenal place. So I would say those are the big ones that I go, and it's all because I love the outdoors. And, I love those kind of environments.
How about, to be more specific, the best team building experience you've ever had? Not a destination, but what did you guys do? What was the best team building experience?
Oh, my goodness. Putting me on the spot, I struggle with the best because I don't want to forget something that, I thought was really...
One of the best, one of the most memorable best that you would say, if you have a chance to do this with your team, go do this.
Something that was really fun we did recently was throwing axes. I think that's probably an easy, practical one. It's competitive, but you don't have to be an athlete to do it. It's a lot of fun, and I mean, it's just a cool activity. So for our listeners out there, if you want to add that into your next team building event, go throw some axes. You'll enjoy it.
Awesome. And I'm hoping this last one's an easy one. Will you come back and be a guest on our podcast again?
Yeah, with notice so I can redo my notes and make sure that I've got
no notes. Next time we're calling you, no notes. Let's go.
I'll tell you, I was up at 5 a.m. on Saturday because I told Rich, I said, I'll get you some thoughts on Saturday. And I wake up at 5:30 on Saturday, not being able to get back to sleep because of knowing I had to come on and meet with you guys. So I really appreciate being able to be here and share. I have faith that someone's listening to it. I mean, I hope that my kids listen to this, right? And maybe this is a legacy that I'm leaving to my three wonderful children, Morgan, David, and Maggie, that they're listening to this at some point and be like, hey, Dad was fun and Dad made an impact in the world. And so maybe this is part of that.
I'm sure it will. And much appreciate you being on. And I'll double down on John's question on having you back again at some point. So thank you again for being on today.
I appreciate it, gentlemen. Thanks very much.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
John, I think we have a in-person podcast to do, several of them. One in the Colorado mountains, one in the Grand Canyon, one in Hawaii, one in Utah. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to go four-wheeling in Utah. I thought that the sand dunes sounded really cool.
It was.
It is funny. We're in the process of planning an executive retreat. So it's a little selfish question, but we're planning an executive retreat for September. And I was actually fishing around for some ideas, being a little selfish there. But I really love that idea. We've talked about this for years. He said, earning trust over time. You kind of somewhat alluded to relationships are built with experiences over time, right? And sometimes they're good experiences, sometimes they're not so good experiences, but relationships are built through those experiences, having more and more of them. And we do have to get out of the mechanics of sometimes getting a team together and it being all work and, oh, let's throw in a happy hour at the end, versus being, no, we're going to go build a relationship together and we'll do some work while we're building a relationship or after we're building a relationship, but that being the primary focus of getting together. And that is so important now, especially with the Zoom world we're living in today. How are teams going to build relationships is exactly by doing the formula that Jeff talked about in this episode.
I don't remember if you and I made this up, if I made it up, if we heard it, if you made it up, but it's been years since, back since we were working together 25 years ago, that I remember we looked at relationships were number and variety of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It was that formula, that number of experiences and variety of experiences equaled the quality of the relationship. And it breaks down as, with number of experiences, there are people who we see every day, that whether it be neighbors, whether it be colleagues, whether it be vendors, there are people we see every day, but the only time we see them is in the exact same type of venue. I would venture to say those are not your best friends. Then you've got people who you don't see very often. They're like your once a year friend back from college or whenever it was. You don't see them very often, but you do all sorts of fun stuff when you see each other. But it's like once a year, once every 3 years. I'd venture to say that's not your best friend. The people who you make really good relationships with, and it's not about making best friends. It's about relationships with customers and colleagues and making friends. But the people you make the best relationships with are ones who you have a high number of experiences and a high variety. And it sounds like one of the things Jeff continues to do, and he did when we worked together, is he added that variety piece in at these offsites through play, his 50% play and 50% work, and that enhanced the relationships.
Yep. I'm going to number of experiences, the variety of experiences, and then maybe even the volatility of those experiences. Because you're right. Like, isn't it funny when you're saying that? I can think of so many times that I just assumed that person A and person B were so close because they've been working together for years or they've been around each other for years. Come to find out, they barely have any relationship at all. They barely know anything about each other. They're just present together all the time. Whereas if you have a variety of experiences, there are different kinds of experiences, and there's different emotions you experience with them. Like you and I have had experiences all over the map. You built those relationships that are so strong that are hard to break. And even though we haven't seen each other all that much over the past few years personally, and had those experiences together, that bond is so strong. So really agree with that. Again, a few weeks ago, we had somebody we brought on the episode that was one of your coaches, somebody who's, executive coach for you. In this particular episode, we brought on somebody you used to work with and for, I believe, for a good amount of time. And somebody that I remember at one point being with you in Chicago and you talking very highly of this individual. I hadn't even met him yet. You've seemed like you've learned a lot from Jeff. What would be the one thing, and it doesn't have to be anything that was in this episode, but maybe it is, what's the biggest takeaway you got from being mentored by him while you guys were working together?
I hate to play semantics for a moment, but I will. You mentioned that I had worked with and for him. And I think that's one of the fundamental things I've learned from Jeff is Jeff never made me feel ever that I was working for him. I was working with him is how he made me feel. Yes, he was my direct supervisor. He had the authority to, whether it be write me up or he had control of promoting for advancement in the company or title changes or pay. But he never used that. That was never a leverage point. It was always influence first. It was never power-based. I never, ever, ever felt like I was working for him in his vision. I was working for myself and my vision. And I happen to have a really good direct supervisor who's a really good coach who could equip me to hit what I wanted. He did what several of our guests have talked about, where you make the client in the story the hero. he always allowed me to play the role of the hero in my own story of my career, rather than I was working for and a servant of him being the hero for his career. And I think that's one of the key lessons. And I keyed in on it when you said that a moment ago. And then that to follow up with that question, like, what an opportunity to expand on that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the definition of a servant leader is what, I would probably also call it. And it's also fun to hear in this episode how he talked about some of the things he learned from you to the exact amplify the point that you just made, including your vision book or your bucket list book that I think is still in the cabinet behind you right now, that you developed 20 some years ago, right? Of different visions and bucket lists that you had, and the fact that he was able to take things away from you. I sure want to take him up on what his simple process is, the worksheet he has for personal vision planning, and those great questions. And certainly, if I think you also challenged me in the past on this bucket list concept, and although I think I have a couple of notes here and there on things I want to do, it is an important thing to do. It gives you definitely some excitement and perspective on, for sure. The 6 propellers, I thought, Rich, just to kind of go to different direction altogether, I thought were really strong. I know he was reading from the website that he had there prepared, but I wrote down all of them and they're all spot on. And to have a coach help you walk through those as a business owner, I think are really important.
Yeah. And how cool that on the website that he was taking a look at, it was built with that very question that I had in mind, that a novice to Cultivate would say, so like, what do you mean by sales? Like, what would I do with you guys when it comes to sales? And I said, team focus. Well, what would I do with you guys when it comes to leadership? Well, work on yourself first, then work on others. So yeah, he went to the website because they have absolute clarity on the answer to that question. And they're clearly over communicating that clarity by having it posted for everybody to see on how to work those 6 propellers.
Yep. Yeah. It was such an easy, thing for him to be able to say, here's the first thing you should be worried about. Here's the first thing you should be thinking about in each of those areas. And, kind of fit a little bit into his entrepreneurial journey, right? The 5 stages: hustler, experimenter, visionary, systemizer, influencer. I really like that. And it seems to me like, Jeff is certainly at that influencer stage himself as an individual, as well as his business with Cultivate, in terms of where they're trying to lead these entrepreneurs. And, to me, when I think about, and I know that I love this, but when he said the first thing we talk about is your financials and how strong your financial balance sheet is, it's kind of, okay, this is a different kind of advisor to me. It's not, the entrepreneurial executive coach on leadership. They focus a little bit more on the business fundamentals in addition to the personal fundamentals and foundation.
Well, I'll say it in a slightly different way than what Jeff said. But it's the same sentiment. People don't go out of business because they are poor at sales or poor at marketing or poor at recruiting or poor at leadership or poor at productivity. Businesses go out of business for one reason only. They can't pay the bills. They don't have enough cash or credit. So he talked about that as being the heart. And the heart, as we know, in a human being, like you can't live without a heart, but you could live without an arm. You could live with mediocre sales if everything else is great, but you can't live without a heart. Like, I think it's genius to start with financials, where the biggest liability is in the business, and then start to work on the rest of the body of the business.